Hi everyone, and welcome to the 5th episode of Whirligig World. We ended the previous video with the construction of our mining station. Now that we have successfully set up the final element here in the construction will be the landing pad for Boulderdash. And we are now measuring the appropriate distance with this little extending arm so that we don't end up building it further away than necessary. So while Alfred Kerman quickly builds this little landing pad for us, and then according to the plans, this little transport vehicle will land here on the landing pad in the near future, and after these containers are filled, everything will be transferred to the Boulderdash, and then from there, it will go back to TRP-1. Now that the landing pad is ready, we actually have no more tasks here on the surface of Thresman, so we can head back home. I mean, not home, but back to TRP-1, because the plan is to wait there for a supply ship, and then we can continue our investigations around the moon later on. The only problem is that you can see that the food is run out on TRP-1, and that's not good. So fortunately, there is still plenty left on the frog. If you take a look, there's practically nothing there. So we arrived just in time. I intentionally designed the frog this way, so that it could be away from the TRP-1 for a longer period of time. The supplies on this ship are still more than sufficient, and there's still plenty to work with, so that the crew doesn't perish. Therefore now we're quickly launching this emergency rescue operation so that the people don't starve here. Here, you can also see that we set off with 2 landing cabins. This is the M1, S2 Titan 1. Hopefully, this won't be necessary in the future. I wouldn't really be happy if I had to rescue the crew like this again. We quickly arrived at the space station. And the first part of this ship contains, on one hand, a food supply, and on the other hand, a large amount of EC, because it might also be needed later on. The only thing is that what is at the front of the spaceship is unguided, so you'll have to dock it carefully. And the other thing is that we don't have a free docking port right now, because the frog is occupying it. But thankfully there's still a free and use standard size docking port available here on the side. We will use that, and then with this, the Titan 1 will be able to properly connect to the TRP-1. And then the next thing, according to our plans, is that we will transfer the crew to the Titan 1's deck, and then we'll see how to proceed, because I didn't really plan this mission. But really, there's nothing else to do now but bring all 4 crew members over to the Titan 1. And here you can see that the front element has these strange solar panels sticking out to the sides. This is from the Probes Plus mod. The mod is quite old. I think this one was made for 1.3.1, but it works regardless. And on top of that, there are also separate scientific instruments available for it. What you see is when an uncontrolled device connects to the base, it spins around and then connects to it. Alright, that's half of it done. We brought the crew over, and then really there's nothing else to do but get as close as possible to Statman's orbit around Mespit. The other question is whether the available Delta V will be sufficient or not. And it really looks like no. So we remained on this not so ideal orbit. So indeed, we have to start with this. We have to bring the crew back from here. So we have also launched this spacecraft called T9X1. This will bring the crew back to the orbit of Statman, if everything goes well. But that's another question, considering the significant difference between the 2 orbits. and this orbit elevation is quite a delta V demanding operation. How this will come back is a very good question. What was going on down there? 2 spots, a dark shadow. That was the shadow of Stabmon. Or maybe you noticed. Alright then, separation has been completed. We are approaching nicely. We are arriving at the Titan 1, and we will try to dock as quickly as possible. Here on the T9X1, there is also supplies just for safety's sake, because it wouldn't be too fortunate if we returned to Mespin and practically everyone died of hunger there. It wouldn't really be good that way. Regardless of whether we try it this way, we should do it as quickly as possible. We're even bringing along a small food storage. And finally, we can dock in a light, let's say, the sunny side, without any problems. The Delta V is more than enough for us to return. And just like that, we make a brief visit to Stabmon. There, Graymun just rose above the horizon. That's perfectly fine. Final separation. And then after that, there's really nothing else to do but set the ideal trajectory. Once this is done, we can start the previously used Firebrand 2 EC2, plus additional booster rockets, just to ensure that the Delta V amount is sufficient. If everything goes well, then we just dock with the Firebrand, and then we can immediately return to the surface. Yes, but there's a huge problem. Indeed, the docking ports are not the same size, so at first I panicked thinking, oh my god, what's going to happen now? Then I remembered that the spaceship we used to land the crew still has its normal size docking port, so we can use that, and then we can save the crew. So yeah, well, that's what happens when you don't prepare properly. But it's okay, despite that we managed to solve it nicely. And practically everything is ready for the crew to head back to the surface, if everything goes well. Just as it should. And then this little T9X1, since we no longer need it, well, we'll send it. And then we will also start heading back nicely. The only problem is that you can see that we are at an altitude of more than 1,000 meters, and our Delta V level is around 300 meters per second. We had only 150 to 100 left, and since Mespin has a very strong gravitational force, it consumes Delta V like it's nothing. So we barely ran out, and we barely managed to survive, so indeed this was a huge success on our part. And so this is the M1S3 Tyrian, because now we will indeed be heading towards Graymun. Just like before, we will solve our journey to the 3rd moon here with the Hohmann transfer. First, we perform a flyby maneuver like this. After a few more turns, we will manage to enter an orbital trajectory. But since our Delta V capabilities are limited, we had to plan a lot to achieve this orbit without using too much fuel otherwise. It might succeed in landing on the surface, but if we can't return, then that's not good. So yes, then there's a rover on the surface as well, because we accepted a contract to move the rover later. Based on my previous experiments, the rover's wheels are, to put it mildly, buggy. So it might end up being a huge bouncing mess, and then the rover crashes into the ground. I don't know. The main thing is that it finally managed to enter an orbital path around the moon. You can see that when we flew past it, it was over 4,000, and now it's down to 2,400. So the moon has indeed consumed quite a bit of it. We will begin our descent nicely, heading towards the crater on the other side. That's why I chose this landing site, because in other parts of the moon, if nothing else, we can land with a probe. Here, since there is no connection with the base, only a manned mission is possible, as there is still no proper communication network around the moon. And as you can see, we're slowly descending downwards. We have Stason and Lamley Kerman on the board. They are the 2 members of the crew. We have a pilot and a scientist here with us. It would have been good if an engineer had come with us for safety reasons, in case something goes wrong, but we'll save that for next time. We are descending slowly and steadily. Here too, our options are limited. Graymun is approximately the same size and gravity as Kerbin's Mun. Indeed. So, actually, this didn't cause any kind of problem for a safe landing. We needed to get stones, and we were able to get them. We quickly hammered one out of its place, and really, there's nothing left to do but plant the flag, which is still needed, since that is also part of the mission. Provided that, and then according to my plans, we will take all the scientific material we have collected back to TORP-1, and there in the laboratory we will enrich it as much as possible. Although it might not work out this way now, because it would require 2 scientists and we only have 1. So indeed, well, never mind. The main thing is that the flag was planted, so we can slowly start heading back to enter an orbital path around the moon. Everything is ready, and we can practically start. Yes, you can see that there is some relay transmission in the upper left corner, but regardless, I didn't want to come here with the probe because if the signal were to get lost, it could be problematic. And moreover, you don't have as many options there as you did, for example, at Grotto 2, where you could at least maneuver somewhat. Because if you're in the shadow, I mean the communication shadow, then it's all over. We are gradually lowering the periapsis all the way to Thresham's orbit. After that, once we manage to achieve the correct orbit, after that there's really nothing else but to approach TORP-1 nicely. There is the TORP-1. We are slowly approaching it. We managed to choose a route that practically allows us to move almost in sync with it, so this is very good, and moreover, our speed isn't too high either. However, we will definitely need a return unit at some point, as the Delta V level is not sufficient to safely return to the vicinity of Mespin. Well, he says we're freeing up a docking space. Here we have detached the cargo from Titan 1, but since it cannot be moved on its own because it doesn't have a satellite core, it just floats in the void like this, and then it will drift away from us. Hopefully. Alright, we're slowly approaching TORP-1, and hopefully there won't be any problems. Theoretically, everything should be fine, yes. Then later on, I might also revise this TORP-1 a bit to have more storage for the fuels, since right now there is practically only space for liquid fuel and the oxidizer. So, honestly speaking, there is no space for the monoprop. And later, when we start working with the nuclear engine, we will only need specifically liquid fuel. So, we will probably also modify this TORP-1 a bit, or I will send another base, we'll see. Slowly but surely, we are approaching the docking port. We're looking at the prograde vector. Everything has come together. We're approaching slowly and steadily. We're not in a hurry. The radiator panels are still there, so we have to be careful with those too. And indeed, it worked. This is just perfect. Well, there's not much food, I'll be honest. But this 359, which is currently on the Tyrionon, should theoretically be enough for a rescue mission. As much fuel as we can still transfer from the frog, we've transferred. Then we'll continue from here. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, and I would be very happy to see your comments as well. See you next time.